Alrighty everyone, what's going on? It's Teddy, and today, I guess we're back with another video. Today, I have a simple plan of raiding every Mario item in Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door. Now, I know the items are kind of, first off, I'd like to say, I don't use items very often. They're entirely optional, which I think is fantastic. But, in addition to that, they are also, useful items to just have in case you want to change up how you play or what you need. So, having said that, we're going to try a different format for this video. Last video, I was recording my own gameplay while making the tier list so you could see abilities. This time, I'm just going to use the tier list. So, it might be a little different in that way, and tell me which one you like more, because I'll move forward doing whichever you like more. So, let's get into it. So now we've got our tier list all set up and ready to rate. So, we're gonna go alphabetically. So the first item on here is Boo Sheet, which I'd like to say, or Boo's Sheet. So, I should like to say that this is an incredibly powerful item for them to give you right off the bat, as it gives you 2 turns of invisibility, which is better than, I guess you could presume pretty much anything else in terms of defensiveness, because it just makes every attack miss. Now, it only applies to you or your partner, and I have to say, though, it is pretty much applicable for every type of playstyle. So, and you can have a partner use it on you instead of Mario using his turn for it. So, overall, where would I put Boo's Sheet? Probably S tier. It is just a really strong defensive item, and I would recommend it to pretty much anyone. Give it a go. I might change up what the tiers are named, because, I don't know if we're even going to use the C or D tier, but we'll see. Next item on the list would definitely have to be Courage Shell, just from alphabetical order at least. So, just to make it clear what Courage Shell does, it boosts your defense by 3 points for 2 turns, which, pretty good. Or, you, Mario, or his partner's defense by 3 for 2 turns. Now, 3 defense is more than you'll basically need for almost any early game encounter, which is when you gain access to Courage Shells. So, in terms of that, I would give it an A tier, just because it's really overkill for the most part. You don't need 3 defense to survive most attacks, and the strongest attacks, I think, are going to be hitting you for, honestly, yeah, probably 3. So if you have a Defend Plus badge in addition to a Courage Shell, you're going to be good to go. No worries there. But at the same time, it is nowhere near Boo Sheet in terms of defensive capability. It's the same 2 turns, and it is also you can still be hit, which is a big problem. Similar problem to Repel Cape. But having said that, I might give it an A. Now, I don't use this item a lot. I don't use items a lot in Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door. But I think it's a solid A tier, and that is honestly just really impressive in my mind. So, next item, Dizzy Dial. So, Dizzy Dials, first off, are good at, or it has a high chance of making all enemies dizzy, and apparently works better on flying enemies. But it has a high drop rate from enemies. It's one of the most common drops that you get from enemies. And Dizzy is a great effect. It can make it so that enemies are sometimes have a chance to miss you when they attack, which is a pretty powerful defensive effect. However, we have to make a note that it said sometimes. And I remember it being this way, always. It just doesn't always work out like you think it will. And because of its variability in how often it works, it doesn't have the reliability of a Courage Shell or Boo Sheet, because it only has a chance to work. So I would give it either B or C. Although it's very common, it just is also, how do I say this? It's just fairly weak because of its effect of, one, having a chance to make enemies dizzy, and dizzy only makes enemies have a chance to miss you. So it's two chances compounded on each other, and when you're playing a RPG game, you usually don't want these chances to start compounding on top of each other when you could have a more reliable effect like Courage Shell or Boo Sheet, which is guaranteed to work, and, you know, Boo Sheet, even better, just makes attacks entirely, you're entirely immune to them, while Courage Shell is just a solid defensive, but you're guaranteed to have that effect. So, I think I'm going C tier. I think that's a pretty understandable thing, B being the complete average item, A being above average, S being the best. So, Fright Mask. Fright Mask is used commonly in speedrunning strats, I believe, but it is similar to Dizzy Dial in that it has a chance to make enemies just entirely flee the battle, which entirely, you know, incapacitates them. You won't be fighting those enemies anymore if they flee the battle. But... Oh, sorry, 1 second. It just... Okay, so, in Thousand Year Door, it just makes enemies flee. You know, no chance, just makes enemies flee. I think that is incredible value, and I can see why speedrunners are so attached to this item. However, you only get 1 star point from the battle, and since for me personally, the highlight of the game is actually the battles, the story's fun, but I really like the battle system. I'm gonna give it a B tier because it's an incredibly strong item, and it, you know, it's just incredibly strong. You can always find a use for it. However, I am not sure that it's gonna be used in every playthrough. Like, I can see it being incredibly useful. It's also, if I remember correctly, really cheap for the most part in places that you can find it, but I'm not even sure you can buy it. However, it is, again, not too uncommon drop. I remember that I had to drop a lot of these the last time I played through because, again, I just don't use items for the most part. So, now we gotta talk about the problem of HP and FP items. I'd like to ignore them except for some standout ones. So, Dried Shroom, you know, we'll give it a D tier. It's 1 HP. That's, I believe it's just 1 HP, but it might be 1 FP too. All I know is that it's basically the filler item. So it is just completely not good, and I wouldn't recommend having any in your inventory if possible. It just fills your bags and makes everything kind of more cluttered. Gradual Syrup is pretty useful, 2 FP for 10 turns. You know, 20 FP in total. My Danger Mario doesn't even have 20 FP total, so you could say that it's really useful depending on, like, what you're planning on doing, but I'd say at best it's a B tier over, like, something like Honey Syrup, which is just 5 FP right off the bat, because Gradual Syrup, as we know, as I've stated, it takes 10 turns to get the full effect of. And most battles don't even last 10 turns. Like, maybe a boss battle, you pop 1 turn 1, so you can just have that gradual FP generation. But besides for boss battles, I think you can finish a lot of boss battles even faster than 10 turns too. So you don't really need it. It is a, you know, a cool item in concept though. Now, we have one of my favorite items here, I see, if that's, what I think it is. We're gonna skip the hot sauce here and go straight into the Whack-A-Bump. This is a noteworthy item. It restores, in Thousand Year Door, 25 HP and FP. We're giving it S tier, because realistically, this is the ideal item, and honestly, it's a bit overkill. So, the Whack-A-Bump, 25 HP, 25 FP, you usually don't need both, so it's always good to have some, like, some Super Shrooms, or some, where is it? I think maple syrups are the ones that heal more FP, but aren't as absurd as jam and jelly. It's pretty good to just have a couple of those on you when you only need one, but whack-a-bumps are very easy to get, and you can just, what's it called? Get a lot of value out of using one. 25 HP and FP is more than you'll need for most food, and I think this is going to be the last food item or HP FP generation item that I rate, because I think this is, or there's one more that I'll rate just for the meme, but this is pretty much as good as it gets, and realistically, you don't need to worry about the other things. You know, it's not like I need to tell you what an Super Shroom is rated, because, you know when you're gonna use a Super Shroom. You're just gonna use it when you need it, and it feels a little goofy to list it up here, especially when they're related to when you get them in the game, like, oh, it's, it's only a B tier because it only heals 10 HP or 20 HP as opposed to 50 HP. You get it earlier in the game when that's perfectly viable, so, again, not rating it too highly. So we've got some more unique items here that I want to rate. So let's see. We have the HP Drain from Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, as all these items are going to be from. HP Drain does 5 damage to enemies and restores that 5 HP to the user. This is, again, very niche, in my opinion. I'd like to say C is... it has its uses, but it's not, like, globally good. I hope that makes sense. I'm gonna have to figure out if what I said even makes sense, but for me, HP Drain is not the first item I'd go for, and it feels like a rare situation where I need to heal 5 HP, and I need to deal 5 damage. Usually I'd just rather deal more damage and use a mushroom if I need 5 HP, but I guess it combines those two effects into one, so if I were to compare it to a mushroom, yeah, I'd probably give, like, mushroom C tier, but, like, HP Drain, it's very good at what it does, but it's also just a little, it's a little much, personally. So, let's see. Ice Storm, I think, is the next one that would be super useful. And let us see. Ice Storm. So, Ice Storm does 3 damage to all enemies that you hit with it. And it has a possibility to freeze them. Now, this, again, is one of those variability items. You start finding these at a reasonable price in Far Far Outpost, which is one of the last chapters of the game. And it makes it really hard to rate this highly when it only does 3 damage that late in the game. And it has the possibility to freeze, but again, like many items, like the Dizzy Dial, I think for where you start finding it consistently, you just need to be doing a little more than a possibility. Like, we like consistency, right? So, HP Drain is guaranteed to do 5 damage, which is just really nice, right? You like doing 5 damage, you like knowing that you're gonna do 5 damage and heal 5 HP guaranteed. This, unfortunately, only satisfies one of those characteristics. You're gonna do 3 damage. And even then, you're not guaranteed to do 3 damage, because if you hit an ice enemy with it, you actually heal them. And you do extra damage against fire enemies, I will give it that, and have a higher chance of freezing fire enemies. But, again, it is, it's just not that good, in my opinion. It's like a nice item, but it's just... it's just very average. I would say that in terms of the AoE items in the game, this is not that great. So, we have maple syrup and jam and jelly. We're gonna skip those. Life Shroom, S tier. That is the easiest S tier I've chosen this entire tier list. while Whack-A-Bumps are the premier food that you're gonna get in the game, and Booze Sheet is excellent defensively. It guarantees you at least a couple turns of survival, great for the final fight, and against multi-attack fights where you're going to be getting struck multiple times in one turn against you. Life Shroom just counteracts death, so I guess you could argue it's like, you know, one of the strongest defensive items in the game. I'd say the strongest defensive item, because where a Booze Sheet, you know, you have 2 turns of... It has a duration. Life Shrooms, you just buy it, store it in your bag, and while it's pricey, I never buy them usually, unless I'm doing like a crazy challenge playthrough or just want to stock up because I think I'm going to do something really challenging or hard. They're really pricey. I think the average price you find them at is 50 gold, or yeah, 50 gold pieces. So really pricey. But, you know, the effect justifies it. The game would be over for you if you weren't using it, and you get to keep playing because you used it. So, next item. Mini Mr. Mini. So, this is an item that, when it's used, it makes all enemies vulnerable. All vulnerable enemies tiny. Which reduces their attack by 2 points. Again, very useful, but... Is it a Courage Shell? I would say no. I would say at best it gets a B tier, because while that effect is useful, and can have more utility because, you know, where a Courage Shell can boost Mario or his partner's HP by 2, or by 3, sorry, their defense by 3 points, the Mr. Mini applies globally to your team, considering it's a debuff to the enemy team, and any enemy it hits will lose, you know, 2 attacks, so basically it gives your team 2 defense, globally rather than 3 defense to 1 partner. Is this a better effect than Courage Shell? I don't think so. I think it gets a B tier, because while that effect is useful, it only works on enemies that can actually be hit by it. Not all enemies can even be, like, affected, which is a little unfortunate, but it is still a pretty strong effect, and B is not bad by any means. I want to make that clear. B is great, and A is, you know, above average, so just because you see something in B, or in C even, or D, again, the most important thing to remember, I always want to emphasize this in my tier lists, is this is just for fun. All the items are fine and fun, and you should try them all out at least once and see what you like, what works for you, because at the end of the day, this is just from my experience, and, like, personally, if it were up to me personally, I'd put Fright Mask in D tier, but I think it has more usefulness than, a D tier item for other people, so I put it in B. But, feel free to comment what you think about all these things. However, we still have a lot more to go. So let's finish this up. Mr. Softener is very readily available early on. You can purchase it for 8 coins at Petalburg, and this will reduce enemies' defense by 3 points, but it won't allow defense to go below 0. So, Mr. Softener, you can get it when in Petalburg, which is when you start first getting introduced to Koopas, who have, I believe, at least 1 defense when they are standing up. And there are certain enemies in the area that have more than 3 defense, I believe, but they give you items that are used to defeat them. So, let me think. When are the times that lowering an enemy's defense by 3 but not below 0 would come in handy? I can think of maybe Clefts. Those are a generally annoying enemy, but I don't know. I think it's going to go in C tier, just because of its niche use. Now, also, niche, I know, is another valid way of saying it. Sorry, this tangential. I think it's just not it is perfectly effective at what it does, but it's such a rare situation that you'll actually get full value out of this item that I don't want to rate it very highly. Because I can only think of Clefts that have that high defense. Maybe late game Koopas have a little more defense too. But, you know, as soon as you tip them over, you know, their defense drops to 0. So it's not really relevant there either. Maybe Koopa Trolls? I think that might be a decent use for a Mr. Softener, but at that point, I think you're just doing enough damage that you can generally just deal with them normally by just using attacks on them, and Mr. Softener might actually be a, you know, not a great use of the team of your turn when you could be using Bobbery or something instead. So, what do I think of this? I think that Mr. Softener is a C tier, a very solid C tier, I'd like to say, mind you. It's good at what it does, but it's not used that often. Honestly, that's making me question Mr. Mini, because I never use Mr. Mini's Mr. Minis. But I gave them a B tier, and I stand by it. I think that's where it'll go. I think that is true. So, our next item that we're gonna rate, because as we said, we're not rating Mushroom, because, you know, Mushroom, I think, honestly would just get an S tier too, for being useful in the most variety of playstyles as opposed to its brothers, but not rating Mushrooms, not rating Jam and Jelly, of course, we could just throw it up in S tier and with Ultra Shroom, but, you know, they do what they do the best. Maybe I'll do that at the end if we're feeling it, but I don't even know. So, I don't know if there's a point to doing this, but I will rate this anyways. Hot Sauce, I know we skipped, and it's something that I barely ever touch, because I mean, it's just a very niche item. It raises the user's attack power by 1 point, or sorry, it charges the user's attack by 1 point. So, you know, not great. But also, again, a solid effect. 1 attack up is pretty useful, especially for someone like Yoshi, who multi-hits. Someone like Goombella, who can multi-bonk, or can just use her head bonk and it hits twice the value. Big value on these partners. So I guess, having said that, it makes me want to put it at a B tier. I never use this item. They cost 10 coins apiece, and you get them relatively late in the game, and I think at that point in the game, you might not even need Hot Sauce. Or if you are using Hot Sauce, then, you know, it's just to kind of make a fight you were already gonna win even more winnable. I'm moving it down to C tier. I like C tier better. I'm thinking about it, and I know that its effect, it's like a Mr. Softener. Like, its effect is good, but it's also very niche in the sense that you don't need it that often. Like, I'm trying to think of the situations where I'd rather have my partner give me a Hot Sauce and then have Mario attack than just attack with both of them. And that situation rarely comes up. Having said that, I think C tier for Hot Sauce is pretty solid, and I think that is a good way to look at items. Next item that we're going to be rating is Thunder Rage. This is just the best item in the game, I think. If you're going to be using an item in the Thousand Year Door, it is good. Okay, so. What? Okay. Sorry. In Paper Mario, I believe this does 5 damage. If I remember correctly, 5 damage. And it is a guaranteed hit, and it also hits all enemies. So, but I am not sure. I'm pretty confident that's the case, though. In terms of damaging items, I think it's the best we're gonna get, and it is a really solid effect that I would say is pretty much better than any of the other items, damaging items in this list, just because it is so generic. It's like a fireball in D&D, which, if you haven't played Dungeons and Dragons, fireball is just a very solid AoE radius spell that does a lot of damage. It's the best balanced generic spell like that. Now, I can't remember where you come upon these. I think they're pretty pricey, but I can't remember. I only pick them up, and I think that has come in handy, or, you know, the pickups have come more in handy for me than anything else. So, I think I'm going to give it an A tier. I hope that is a fair rating for you guys, and I hope you can understand that. Having said that, I think that's as high as an offensive item is going to get. Unfortunately, that spoils a bit for later in the list. Next, we have the present. Or, I can't remember if it's called the present. I think it might be called the mystery box. Oh, yeah, it's the mystery box. So, mystery box gives you a random effect, and I'm just going to go ahead, and I don't want to put it in D tier. I think it has to go in C tier, because it has a lot of useful effects, but it's just not, you know, it's just not guaranteed. It's D tier. I can't stand, this is making me think that I'm gonna move Dizzy Dial to D tier, actually. D for Dizzy Dial, and Dried Shroom, and then I guess Mystery Box, but, you know, Dizzy Dial, what differentiates it from these items is that these items have a guaranteed effect, at least, and Dizzy Dial is not guaranteed to do anything. It can just miss all the enemies, and then you have a dud item. Mystery Box, I think, is higher than that, but also due to it being completely random what its effects are, I think I have to give it a D tier. It can have really high highs, but it can also do... You know what? I'm gonna give it C tier, because you're basically guaranteed a positive effect. It's not always positive. I think there are 2 effects that are somewhat disappointing, but other than that, you're guaranteed at least something good, right? You know, worst thing you can get is a Dizzy Dial, which is D tier, but you can get a Thunder Rage, which is an A tier. You can get a Fire Flower, which we somehow haven't rated, and now I'm noticing isn't on the list, is it? Did I miss Fire Flower? Huh. Yeah, I guess Fire Flower is not on the list. We'll use the Poison Mushroom for Fire Flower. Now that I know it. So Fire Flower does 3 damage, I think guaranteed, or I should say, damage that isn't reduced by defense, just like Thunder Rage, just like any of the items. It'll do guaranteed damage. Poison Mushroom here is going to represent Fire Flower, or you know what? Let's use F for Fire Flower. That'll be more understandable, I think, in the grand scheme of things. I am going to say that Fire Flower would be, again, an A-tier item for when you can start using it and get it. So, imagine that's Fire Flower, but I don't know how that was missed. That's one of the most iconic items in the game in my mind. That is kind of crazy. Okay, there we go. So, back to the tier list. F stands for Fire Flower, by the way. I put Fire Flower in A tier because 3 damage to all enemies is just really solid for a very early game item. And although it gets eclipsed by Thunder Rage and honestly just Ice Storm as well, I think the fact that, it's making me want to move Ice Storm to B tier. Because Ice Storm does have a guaranteed effect of 3 damage, but but C, because you get it so much later. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think we're gonna give F for Fire Flower. Or, you know, A for Fire Flower, but it's represented by the F. Next item, Point Swap. Point Swap is an item that I am not gonna lie, I just never take advantage of it. But it makes Mario and his partner switch their HP and FP. So, having said that, I play Danger Mario a lot. And Point Swap, and you know, partners share FP with Mario. So it just has you and your partner switch HP. Danger Mario usually only has 5 HP. However, I have made good use out of this item. I'm putting it in C tier because it is niche. I think that, in the grand scheme of things, there are items that just have a better value, like, you know, Super Shroom here, just, you know, heal your partner on your turn, or heal yourself on your turn, rather than swapping your HP or FP. But oh, I'm stupid. Cut that part out, post-editing me, hopefully I do that. So, when it says it switches Mario and his partner to switch their HP and FP, it means that it switches your FP to be your HP. So again, I play Danger Mario a lot, so I only have 5 HP, and I usually have somewhere around 15 to 20 FP at the end of the game, but I'm usually around 10 FP the whole game. So, this item is a full heal, however, I can also just get full healed by a Life Shroom or a Mushroom. However, in a normal Mario build, this item might actually be good. But I'm rating it C because this is incredibly niche. While it allows Mario or his partner to swap HP or FP, and even in Danger Mario, I guess, it can be useful because your partner can swap to their HP to fill up your FP again if you ever are in a pinch and run out. However, I am always a, you know, we have Jam and Jellies, we have Whack-A-Bumps, which we have up here in S tier, we have Honey Syrup. I would rather just use an item that solves both problems of now your HP is full, now your FP is full, rather than just dealing with one later. I think this item is fun and can be a great slot because I guess it's more versatile than having Honey Syrup and an Ultra Shroom, or, you know, Maple Syrup and Ultra Shroom, because, or sorry, a Super Shroom is what I'm hovering over, because that, you know, it's 2 for 1 slot, but it also just puts one problem, it delays a problem, basically, because once you swap, you're either gonna have low HP on, like, your partner, or low FP, or whatever, and now you're gonna need to use a turn to get all that back, or you're just gonna have to not utilize that resource for the rest of the battle. So, I think C tier is pretty fair for it. It's niche, and that's fine. So, next item is POW Block. POW Block is pretty generic. We're gonna have to, I wanna remember exactly what it does, but that is gonna be tricky for me. Oh man. So I believe it does 2 damage to all enemies. So this is another early game item like the Fire Flower. Which, by the way, the F is for Fire Flower. I don't want to put it on this side, because then it makes POW Block look like it's an F tier, but the POW Block is not an F tier. I think that for how early you get it, 2 damage is more than enough most of the time. And it can also be used, I believe, to knock down enemies, but I'm not sure. Yeah. Okay, so it can knock down flying enemies that are on the map, on the screen, like, you know, a part of the terrain. So if the swoopers are hitting from the sky, which you meet in Twilight Town, I know swoopers are a big part there. I think you see some in Keelhaul Key. I'm trying to think. You see some at the end of the game in the Thousand Year Door. Sorry, that's a spoiler, but based on the name, I think you can assume we're gonna have something to do with the Thousand Year Door. Having said that, I think POW is a B tier. I think that you get fire flowers around the same time, and fire flowers are just better. Of course, they have the weakness to fire enemies. If you aren't dealing with fire enemies, then Pow Block, or if you are dealing with fire enemies, Pow Block's probably better, but also at the same time, I think it's just better to be using something like, you know, your partner's attack or Mario's attack. I know your partners can't really attack fire enemies, which is a big oversight. However, next item, Power Punch. So, Power Punch is a direct buff to Mario's attack, and it gives him just 2 attack. Now, this is better than Hot Sauce, because Hot Sauce, I believe, is a charge to Mario's attack. And this will, or I think this can be your partner too, but I'm using Mario for the example. It makes them huge, which buffs attack power. Just like, I'm trying to think, Marilyn, I think, gets the effect in Out of the Shadow Sirens. Usually, when you're battling them, that makes her huge. So, 2 attack power, I think that's A. It's better than Hot Sauce, like, way better. And it is, you know, 3 turns of attack power based on when you use it. I think that's solid. And it's a pretty substantial boost. I would say it's more useful than Mr. Softener in general, because 2 attack power can be better than lower your defense by 3 to a base of 0 in most situations. So, you know, great design on that one. I like it a lot. I think it is pretty solid, and in the grand scheme of things, it is very useful. Okay, next item is Repel Cape, that we're going to be rating. So, this gives Mario the dodgy effect, and will make some enemies miss for 4 turns. Again, this has the same problem as Dizzy Dial, I would say. Dodgy Cape can make you feel powerful, but unless you're running a standard HP, FP, Mario build and have a lot of HP and FP, it's a little too dangerous to be using. I want to give it a B tier, because 4 turns is a long time, and generally you'll have all your situations dealt with by then. But yeah, I would say it's a solid defensive item. It's not as good as Courage Shell, but it is. Yeah, you know, actually, I think B tier is perfect for it. It's not as good as Courage Shell, but it is, it's basically the idea of dodging an attack over mitigating 50% of the attack. Courage Shell guarantee mitigates 50% of the attack, or, you know, 3 damage worth of attack, which is pretty solid for 2 turns, I believe, or 3 turns, but Repel Cape gives you a chance to dodge every attack for, you know, 4 turns. Is it better? Probably not, because it's more variable. You can high roll and have a really good time with it, or you can low roll and just have a miserable time. So, I am going to factor that into where I put it, and having said that, I think it deserves a B tier even with the high-low roll variability. Just the chance that you can get a really high roll gives it a lot of value for me. So, Spite Pouch is next. This isn't a Spite Pouch, is it? I don't know, it might be. I don't know if that's a Spite Pouch. Is there any other thing that it could be? Alright, I'm gonna pretend this is a Spite Pouch, and if it's... Oh, no, this is a Spite Pouch. I don't know what this is. I figured out what it was. This is Ruin Powder. So Ruin Powder applies the Confused effect to all enemies, which the Confused effect is better than Dizzy Dial, because Dizzy, while it gives enemies a chance to miss, Confused makes it so they have a chance to attack each other, in addition to attacking you. So it's guaranteed to apply its effect, which I feel like rates it in B tier, because, at least, you know, to enemies that can actually be confused and aren't boss enemies. But at the same time, it's, Confused just gives them a chance to attack the wrong target. So, you know, they can still aim for you and hit Goombella instead, or, Koops, or whoever. or they could also hit each other if there's multiple enemies that you're confusing. With this in mind, it makes me want to put it in C tier, but I think I'm gonna give it a B tier. Just... no, I've got to give it a C tier. So for me, what makes an item good is the predictability of it, and the general utility of it. So this could be very useful if you used it in a battle with 4 or 5 enemies. But if you use it in a battle with, you know, 2 enemies, which I wouldn't recommend because I remember these things being fairly rare. But you might be able to get them a decent bit. I don't remember exactly, but I would just be... it's confused is an effect that is really annoying when it's put on you because it seems to work a lot. So based on, like, okay, based on my experience with Confused, I would give it a B tier because it seems to work like 75% of the time you'll hit the wrong target. And whether that's, you know, a target you're still happy with or you're attacking your partner, it's still annoying when you're not attacking the right target, so I'm gonna put it there. Now, I think that's a fair rating for it. It could be C, though, if we're thinking about it in general, but I'm gonna give it a B for now. Next item we are rating is the Thunderbolt, which, let's go to Thunderbolt. Thunderbolt is an attack that will do 5 damage. So, basically, it is the same damage as a Thunder Rage, but only to 1 target, but you get access to them earlier on. I think this is a B tier ability. Or, you know what? I might even give it a... yeah, I think it's B. No, but I gave... This is tricky now. Because I think this is a really good item, but I gave HP Drain a B too, and doesn't it feel like HP Drain should just be higher because it does more? I don't use items a lot, and Thunderbolts drop more often than HP Drains, so maybe I'm overvaluing Thunderbolt. This is a really tricky situation to be in. I was contemplating putting Thunder Rage in S tier because it is just, I guess, the strongest AoE ability, but you also get it really late in the game. But also at a point in the game where if you Thunder Rage and then, like, multi-bounce with Mario, then you can usually defeat anything you're battling. Maybe we move HP Drain up to... no. I think we're going to keep it like this. And we are going to... because this has a different usage. I think the HP Drain, while being a nice effect, is, you know, I just don't think it comes in handy often enough. I think HP is readily available for you, or places where you can replenish your HP. And I've been in very rare situations where I've thought, I'm low HP, rather than using a mushroom outside of battle, I'm gonna use an HP Drain. So I would value these at about the same. I'll put HP Drain higher than I'll put Thunderbolt, because, I think HP Drain has that extra utility, while Thunderbolt brings nothing but damage. It's just raw 5 damage, as generic as it gets. Sleepy Sheep. I can guess that you can guess what I think of Sleepy Sheep, just based on where I've rated other items. So Sleepy Sheep causes most enemies to fall into a deep slumber, which causes them to not be able to attack. But enemies have different resistances to sleep, and bosses have very high resistance against it. So, Sleepy Sheep will temporarily immobilize enemies, and I believe that when you attack them, it makes them more vulnerable to waking up. But, I don't know. That could be completely wrong, and if, I think every time you attack an enemy while they're asleep, they have a chance to wake up. If, Twilight Town, the forest on the way to Creepy Steeple is anything to go off of, I don't use Sleepy Sheep a lot. Again, the chance really bothers me. Honestly, I'm gonna raise Ice Storm to a B tier. And I'm gonna leave Pow Block and Niche. No. I'm leaving Ice Storm down here, actually. I'm moving Pow Block to Niche, though. I think Pow Block fits better down here. But Sleepy Sheep, I gave Mr. Mini, or Mini Mr. Mini, a B tier. Because it's... but I'm thinking that Sleepy Sheep... Sleepy Sheep can be useful, because if you put all the enemies to sleep, or put a couple of the enemies to sleep, you can utilize those turns where they're sleeping to, you know, just, like, heal up. And just, if you don't attack the enemies that are asleep, you can just use it as recovery rounds for yourself and treat it like a break from the battle. Item yourself up, get all healed up, you know, FP, check yourself, heal that all the way up. I think you can put yourself in a really good situation. And I don't know. This is where it's getting really hard, because I really don't know if I want Sleepy Sheep in B tier or C tier. But I think C tier is fine. So we're going to go with C tier. And, you know, if we try anything, you know, maybe we'll make some adjustments at the end. Again, not rating the HP items. Poison Mushroom, it just feels dumb to rate, because, you know, obviously. Okay, next item. Do we rate Space Food? I don't see a point. I don't think it has anything that makes it special. Yeah, I'm not gonna bother Space Food. I think the next one we rate is the Spite Pouch. Alright, so the Spite Pouch allows Mario to reflect damage, half the damage he receives, back to the enemy. So, it's similar to any other reflect effect from most games. They don't give you the full value because that would be a little overpowered, but it can be useful, especially if you're running like a generally healthy Mario build. I know, as I've said, I always run a less healthy Mario build and a more... what would I call it? I don't run as healthy of a Mario build. I run Danger Mario most of the time, so Spite Pouch, for me personally, would be a D tier. And I would... But, I don't know. Spite Pouch can be useful. It's just... I'm giving it a C tier, and maybe... I'll give it a C tier because it's not too unreliable. However... it's making me call into question some of these other tiers that I have. Like, I'm thinking that Spite Pouch might actually... I don't know. It's just... it encourages a playstyle I don't like. So, personally, do I think it's, like, D tier? No. But I feel like it kind of fits there because I hate the idea that this item encourages you to take damage, and you get more value out of taking damage. But I think what you're supposed to treat it like is I'm taking damage anyways, and now half of it's being reflected to the enemy. But for me, I always read it as now I can take damage because I reflect half of it back. So in my mind, it just creates a negative feedback loop. When you defend, you're going to do less damage to the enemy. When you perfect parry, you're getting less value out of your Spite Pouch. I'm giving it a D tier because of that. Yeah, I think that's... I hope I made my point. Okay. Stopwatch. Stopwatch is, I think, a more solid version of Sleepy Sheep. You get it later on in the game. So, in Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door... it immobilizes enemies. What's it called? Oh, yeah. So, enemies will be immobilized when you get hit by it, and it doesn't have that Sleepy Sheep. I think it's gotta be rated higher than Sleepy Sheep, but at the same time, it is Not a very common item, and where you can find it commonly, it's really expensive, I think. It's like 30 to 24 coins, and although it is a really powerful item, I mean, it completely immobilizes targets, as I've said. I think it's, I'm selling myself on it. It immobilizes targets for a couple turns with no chance of them waking up. This is basically as close as we can get to an enemies are affected, guaranteed positive effect. But I don't know if it's guaranteed. I know that you won't want to use it on bosses, probably. I don't know if it works on bosses. If it does, then yeah, the B tier guaranteed, maybe A tier. But I'm not sure about that. So, having said that, I am going to, yeah, I'll give it a B tier for now. We'll play it safe. I guess Tasty Tonic, if that's what I believe it is kind of a food item, but it's also very different. Yeah, that's a Tasty Tonic. Okay. So, if I remember, it just cures poison. Yeah. So, it's, you know, it's fine. I don't know what to say about it. It's C tier. It's niche. Now, we're gonna get to a fun one. This is the Trial Stew. I believe you make it by combining a Thunderbolt and a Thunder Rage. And it is almost entirely negative. I am going to give it a D tier because it has next to no use. So, the way I read it is that it lowers you and your partner's HP to 1, I believe your FP to 1, and it makes it so that you can, what's it called? What am I thinking of? It lowers your HP to 1, guaranteed. Oh yeah, it just lowers your HP to 1, but it maxes out your star points, or your star power. So, it's kind of like the Gambit of cards. You know, you do a risky play with the hopes that you can basically trap your opponent, but your opponent's also a computer, so they're probably just gonna hit you and read right through it, like, oh, I tricked you, now I have full star power and I'll kill you next turn. But then they're like, oh, well, you just did the job for me, and then they slap you once and you're done. So, I'm giving it a D tier. I think if I were to add an extra tier and add anything else to it, I get the meme. It's a very memeable item, and also people can say, oh, you know, Peril Mario exists. You know, Peril Mario will make it S tier, right? But I think that people just more reliably, you know, have... I think if Paper Mario, if you're playing Peril Mario and you're using a Trial Stew to get your, like, to your Peril state, I think you just gotta, like, you gotta figure some stuff out or something, because I feel like there's just better and safer ways to do it than, you know, Trial Stew. I guess it's nice to use out of combat, maybe, but then you're not getting the effect of triple star power for the battle. So, yeah, having said that, you know, D tier. Don't use it. And we are going to... Give me a second. This is taking a lot longer than I thought it would take, to be honest. We've got one more item, though. Alright, we're ready. We got one more item, and that is the Volt Shroom. So, the Volt Shroom will damage enemies that physically touch Mario, and it allows him to jump on electrified foes without taking damage, which is a little-known effect. So, it's useful, but there are also badges that can negate it. You know, point is, it is another reflect damage ability, or sorry, item. So, or not reflect damage, it is another do damage on contact item. So it's like, if I'm getting damaged, you're getting damaged too. Now, my philosophy is I just don't like these items, because I don't like the idea of an item, what's it called? Just, I don't like items that encourage you to get hit. But this one doesn't necessarily encourage you to get hit because I believe you can still defend and also do damage to enemies. But if you're gonna do a perfect parry, you're gonna, you know, get through the enemy anyways, right? So, I guess, yeah, I think that's kind of sums up my opinion. It might be C tier, but I think I'm happier with it at D tier because I don't think it's worth the bag space. So, lightning round. We are going to rearrange anything that I think could be moved. I think I'm happy with my A tier. I think I could also, like, in general, just put Mushroom in A tier, and now we have our, like, you know, HP and FP items are always useful. I'm not gonna be mad if you're carrying one around when you play the remake. It makes sense. It's just good items, and whether that is a maple syrup, a super shroom, gradual shroom, not recommended, honestly, or slow shroom, I think this might be called. Gradual syrup, honestly, just carry whatever HP FP items you need based on whatever build you're running, and that should be fine. Thunder Rage, I might move up to S tier just because it is the strongest multi-target ability. Give Thunderbolt an A tier, which will kind of balance out the B tier a little more. And where would I might even move the, there are some items that, if I think about it, like, do I want this in my bag? It just really, you know, offsets me, or upsets me to see them as high as they are. Like, Mystery Box, I don't want in my bag, because I don't know what it's gonna do. Point Swap, I don't want in my bag. There are better items in the game that can do similar things, but I just, a POW block, I think, gets kind of power crept really quickly. I think Fire Flower does the same job almost in 99% of the situations, but better. There are very few enemies where the POW block can really shine, but in those encounters it can shine, it really does shine. This I kind of want to move up, because I think I make it sound harder to get than it is. So I might move Ice Storm up to B tier, because, you know, it's a really powerful effect, and I think you can buy them even in Twilight Town, but it's a little pricey. It's like 18, 20-something coins. But where you start seeing them more often is Far Far Outpost, which is, you know, last chapter of the game, or second to last, and at that point, it's like, should I... Is it even worth it when I can find, like, rare, you know, Thunder Rages out in the wild, or just buy Thunder Rages instead? And I would say no, especially when in Far Far Outpost the enemies are ice-themed, and, you know, the effect, I believe, heals them instead of doing damage. So, I think this is my complete tier list, and I'm pretty happy with it. I think Ice Storm I'm happy with moving up. I think the rest of this makes sense. If you wanted to see the tiers, like, renamed, I would say it would be based on, like, bag space and stuff. So I would say, like, always happy to see in bags for S tier. A tier would be, again, like, have a couple of these on me. These are, like, special happy to see in bags. Would like multiple of them. This is happy to have a couple of each, or a couple, one from each category in my bag. This can be used in place of one of the A tier items, but it will, you know, obviously take up that slot and might not get as much value. C tier is, niche uses, but when they are used, they are really good, or they are just outclassed by other items. And D tier is items I would not recommend carrying. Wow, I can talk a lot when it comes to Paper Mario. I know I said I was down in the dumps recently in a video or a while ago. Don't worry, when I talk about Paper Mario, I'm really chipper. I really like talking about the game. I really like the game. And I can't wait to play the remake with you guys. I'm planning on streaming it whenever it comes out, so I'll update you on that. But thank you for tuning in, if you did. And, leave a like if you like the tier list. Tell me what you disagree with and what tiers you might change. And having said that, I'm Tyrite. Call me Teddy if you want. And I think with that, I'm out.